Okay, well, welcome to another edition of the RHôNE Infobites. This month we are joined by Gabe. Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you're from R-Biopharm Inc.
I am. I'm from R-Biopharm Inc., the U.S. subsidiary.
Yep.
Been with the company for over 21 years now.
Scary how time flies, isn't it?
Yes, about the same time for you, I believe.
Yeah, it is. So yeah, over 40 years experience, just over for between us, yeah.
Absolutely, and we're only in our mid-20s.
Yeah, well, that's it. Yep, definitely. So yeah, before we get started, I'd like to ask all our guests a quick question. So really, I would like to ask you to share a food story with us. So it can be about a great food that you've tasted, dish when you've been traveling, a bad dish, or perhaps just a funny story.
All right. Well, I have one that's a funny story. It's not directly mine, but is related to this particular podcast.
Okay.
Since this is a cannabis-related podcast, story from some friends of mine who work in a hospital, and had a lady come in, and she had some stroke-like symptoms, couldn't talk, a lot of things like that, and did a lot of testing, couldn't figure out what's going on. Next day, she woke up and was largely fine. Doctor talked to her and figured out that she'd had a cannabis brownie.
Okay.
To the tune of, I think, 200 milligrams, which is a really heavy dose. And that would explain why she wasn't feeling so well and felt well the next day.
Okay.
So figured it was food and cannabis wrapped into one.
Yeah, sure. Managed to walk out the hospital that day, did she?
She did, actually, yes.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact.
Feeling rather embarrassed, or?
I think so. I think it was a learning lesson for her to read packaging a little more carefully.
Yeah, maybe not eat the full brownie the next time.
Perhaps not. Perhaps not.
Yeah, so as you say, we're talking about the cannabis industry today. I know we've been out in the US, Canada, quite a few times over the last year or so. And as I say, I was quite surprised the last time I was there, some of the changes that have come in now that...
Happen every few months. There seems to be some new change.
Yeah, I mean, going through Canada and the airports, you've got the bins to drop off any samples that you might have before flying, and any other changes that you've seen coming in?
Well, I mean, Canada was the first country, well, at least near me in North America,
Yep.
to legalize. So they were kind of the trendsetters. In the U.S., it's not federally legal, but states can decriminalize or have medical cannabis or make it recreational. And it seems like every election cycle or even in between, there are states that are making it recreational. And I should have looked the stat up before I got here, but we're probably looking at a quarter or so of the states, if not more, that are recreational now. Okay. And I know this last election cycle, there were another 2 or 3 that made it recreational. So yeah, it's becoming quite a thing, and there's talk of it becoming federally legal sometime in the semi-near future.
Okay. Yeah, so as you say, constantly changing.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. And what about customers in the cannabis industry? Are you seeing more requests from that side?
Absolutely, yeah. As it usually starts with the states that are medical, because the state boards will want to contact us for testing recommendations. But as it becomes recreational, the testing is typically done by licensed laboratories. And so those licensed laboratories will reach out to us for, again, testing recommendations and methods.
Yep. Yeah, and it's something we're seeing worldwide as well. It's not just, I don't think, the US and Canada. Countries like Spain, Macedonia, Colombia, for example, where legislation has changed, we are seeing more and more interest.
Amsterdam, perhaps?
Do you know, actually, as a country, we've not seen many requests from, to be honest. It's the one you would expect.
Absolutely.
But it's the one we haven't really seen many requests for. So there you go.
They've been doing it the longest. They're used to it by now.
Possibly all set up and ready. So yeah, obviously, the requests are coming for mycotoxin analysis, mostly, yes, aren't they? Can you tell us a bit about mycotoxins, why people should be analysing for these?
Absolutely. So mycotoxins, for those who are unaware, are mold metabolites. So you have a mold that gets in a food product, or in this case, a plant. Yep. And that mold will get stressed and will secrete this toxin that has regulatory limits depending on the country you're in and depending on the toxin. And they're obviously harmful to our health. So that legislation will apply also to cannabis flower and cannabis food products.
Yeah. And also there's all the mycotoxin regulations for other foodstuffs. So cocoa, there's, cereals.
Oh, absolutely.
Anything,
Grains.
so, yeah.
Spices, grains. I mean, it's huge in the States for grain testing as well.
Yeah. So obviously now with these, cannabis products, you've got brownies, you've got cookies. There's all sorts of potential contamination there for mycotoxins. So,
Absolutely. The entire process.
yeah. So increased awareness, if you like, increased testing requirements.
Indeed.
So what's the ways that you can analyze for mycotoxins?
Well, in our world, there are a variety of technologies that you can test for mycotoxins. You can use rapid test, lateral flow, which is like a pregnancy test.
Yep.
You can do ELISA testing, which is microwells, like a little bench chemistry, essentially. And then there's immunoaffinity columns, which is what applies most to the cannabis industry, which is where you would clean up a sample extract to make it appropriate to run to a HPLC or LCMS, a high-level diagnostic machine.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the benefits, isn't it, of immunoaffinity cleanup. It can remove all of the rubbish, all of the sample matrix. So, yeah, if you've got cannabis resin, which is very pigmented, you've got your cookies, which have got all sorts of sugars, proteins, carbohydrates, whole range of things there.
Yes.
It removes that, making it nice and easy to
Yeah, absolutely. The
analyze.
resin, I would say, is probably probably one of the more difficult things of the plant material.
Yep.
Is it can gum everything up,
Yeah.
including the machine. If
exactly.
If you're not careful on how you clean that sample up.
Yeah. And what kind of mycotoxins are people looking for in the cannabis and cannabis products?
Typically, looking for aflatoxin and ochratoxin is what we run into most in North America. Yep. For a variety of reasons. Aflatoxin is probably the most established as far as regulatory limits, known carcinogen, so it's a good one to be testing for. And ochratoxin, is also not a great mycotoxin to be eating or inhaling. Yep. So that makes a lot of sense there too. Are you seeing any other toxins in your worldwide scope?
Like you're saying, most people are interested in the afla-ochra, but I have heard reports that some people, I think some Canadian sites were interested in analysing for deoxynivalenol, but we've not actually come across that. It's been chat, I think, up till now. But
certainly, yeah. And we've had a couple requests of that, but if the regulatory I guess papers are not written to test for those, then they're not necessarily going to look for them. But yes, I mean, with certain mycotoxins being more prone to the north versus the south, it would make sense that Canada should probably be looking more for DON and zearalenone, perhaps more so than ochratoxin and aflatoxin. But if that's the way the regulation's written, that's what you test for.
Still, I suppose, a new market, isn't it? People are still learning and understanding about the mycotoxins in this matrix.
Absolutely.
I mean, when you've been working with labs, do you know whether they've been finding mycotoxins in the cannabis?
It's a good question. Largely no. And I think the reason for that are a lot of the cannabis grown, I would say, especially in Canada, tends to be in tightly controlled environments. And so you just don't have the contamination risk from it being grown outside as much for that mold to get in, to then get stressed, to then make the toxin. Yep. So, and I would say the States as well, by and large, they're inside grow houses, if you will. They're not necessarily out in the open. So generally speaking, in my experience, I've not seen a lot of positives, but certainly they do exist. Yeah.
Again, I'm not aware of many positives. There is one recent publication which was from a lab in Luxembourg. They were actually looking at the mycotoxin content in seized cannabis, so illegal.
Yeah, sure.
But they did actually find there wasn't so much aflatoxin, but I believe they found ochratoxin in some of the samples, quite a large percentage actually, which ranged up to about 16 ppb, so relatively high contamination. So I think it's an interesting one. Need to do a bit more research, a bit more analysis.
Do they think that was grown nearby, or was that grown?
They have no idea of the origin. It states that in the publication. Obviously, it was illegally seized.
Sure.
They don't have any information at all. So, perhaps there's scope there for further publications in future in that area.
Sure, and that's with these states that have made it recreational, they tend to carve out a part of the legislation to allow homegrown, for personal use. So I would say there's probably a larger risk with that people probably don't even know exists if they're growing it themselves outside and don't even realize that it is a risk to test for it. So
yeah. And obviously, we're a manufacturer of test kits for mycotoxin, but who do you think could be interested in testing? It's not going to be your home growers, as you sort of said. Who do you think?
Well, it would be the laboratories, whether it's the state labs that are overseeing all of it, or maybe doing the medical part of it, or the commercial labs that have been licensed to do it. Yeah. Those would be the labs that would be most interested in utilizing cleanup tests or cleanup columns for their high level analysis, or even the more rapid ELISA test.
Yeah. So there are fully automated systems available, which you can make analysis much easier. So working with an immunoaffinity column or immunoaffinity cartridge. What do you think the benefits of being able to automate sample cleanup are?
Benefits obviously are the effort needed to get it onto the system, less human interaction to get it to that point. If you are doing a lot of samples, certainly your throughput's higher.
Yep.
So there's a lot of cost and time advantage to that. So states like California, where their legislation tends to be written, I believe it is written to test not only the raw flower product, but also finished goods. Okay. So your food products or your beverages that contain it, those also need to be tested, whereas other states just let you test the flour that goes into the food product.
Okay. So it's a relatively new area, and I know AOAC have a working group which is looking at the cannabis side, so it's called CASP, the Cannabis Analytical Science Programme, and they're looking at developing official methods for labs. So not only have they been looking at mycotoxins, they're looking at microbiological methods, pesticides, and so on. What do you think the importance of working with official methods means to a lab?
Well, for any laboratory, especially the one that's ISO certified, it just makes their life easier to implement a method if it's been validated. So there's again, a time benefit to adopting a method that has been vetted by a group such as AOAC instead of doing their own large validation. Yeah. Is there anything else, any other advantages you see?
Yeah, I think, again, like that, customers would have added confidence. They know the method works. It's been stringently validated. It meets strict criteria. So, yeah, being able to pick that up and go in the lab, you've got the confidence, I think, is the main thing.
Certainly.
Rather than having to start from scratch and develop your own method, let's
Absolutely.
be honest.
Yeah.
Most labs just don't have the time for that.
They certainly don't. So
I think we've covered the cannabis industry in quite a quick run through there. Anything else to add?
Well, I touched on that, in the States that we see it largely, or we anticipate it being federally legalized sometime, let's say in the next 5 years. So at that point, there will hopefully be some harmonization of methods or recommended methods, if you will, because right now, it's a little bit of the Wild West. So hopefully for what we do, we can be a part of validating those methods and offering them to the industry. So when it is federally legal in the States, that we can be a one-stop shop to get these labs set up. Yeah,
and as you say, it's been an area we've been working on. We've been working with some industry leaders. We've been looking at new methods. We've been publishing our results because really we want to help labs get set up as quickly as possible.
Certainly.
At the end of the day.
And being transparent with what we've done helps that.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Gabe. It's been a pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you.